Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the historic occurrence of unprecedented and catastrophic loss in Hawaii. We're thinking of our community members and their loved ones who are affected. We thank you for coming together today for this conversation. Welcome again. My name is Carolyn Gray Kimberlin. I'm the Senior Director in Alumni Relations, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this conversation this afternoon with President Beilock. I'm joined today by Sarah Gupta, class of 19, chair of the DAPAAA group, as well as Ariel Zhou, class of 2008, member of the executive committee, as well as the other members of the DAPAAA board. I'd like to start with an introduction of President Beilock. Dr. Sion Leah Beilock is the 19th president of Dartmouth. She previously served as the president of Barnard College at Columbia University, and before that was the Stella M. Rowley Professor of Psychology and Executive Vice Provost at the University of Chicago. A cognitive scientist by training, President Beilock studies how people and organizations perform under pressure. She's the author of 2 critically acclaimed books, Choke and How the Body Knows Its Mind, and 120 peer-reviewed papers. Her 2017 TED Talk has been viewed over 2.7 million times. Thank you, President Beilock, for spending time with us this afternoon.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by handing it over to Ariel and Sarah, who will provide a little bit of history and background on the DAPAAA group. So Ariel and Sarah, we turn it over to you to begin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm 19. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm co-chair of DAPAAA. Next slide, please. DAPAAA was founded in 1998 by Doug Chia, who I think is here today. Hi, Doug. Minju Lee and David Su. And DAPAA's mission is to further the intellectual, social, cultural, and educational well-being of the APA community at Dartmouth, and to provide support to alumni in matters of mutual concern. We're really excited to celebrate our 25th anniversary next May in Hanover, and we'll be having special speakers like George Takei and Helen Zia. Please see our website for more information and how to get involved. Next slide, please. So we are we've been the largest racial minority at the college for the last 20 years. We're usually around 14 to 16% of campus. And Asian Americans are often undercounted since this data relies on self-identification from admissions applications and doesn't take into account non-residents or people who identify as 2 or more races. We have over 8,200 alumni worldwide and roughly 1,000 outside of the US. I see just a quick shout out to Lo Yi Chan, 54, who was master planner architect at the college behind Rocky. It's really amazing to see our impact on the campus, and we're really excited to see where we can go from here. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little background on some of our DAPAAA community building initiatives. We started a social justice book club in 2021 where we've read over 20 books. We generally do career panels, resume workshops, and mentorship programs with alums and students. And we also have monthly roundtable with other Dartmouth affiliated groups. And we also attend mixers, movie screenings with Ivy Plus API alumni organizations. Since 2016, we've raised over $1.6 million for the Dartmouth College Fund, and we also fundraise for graduation stools for seniors in partnership with Opal. If you're interested in getting involved with DAPAAA, please check out our website and our social media. We are holding board elections this month, and we'd love to hear from you. I'm going to pass it over to Ariel now.
Thanks so much, Sarah. We can go to the next slide. I want to say hi to everybody, all of our DAPAAA community members, and also hi and welcome to President Beilock. My name is Ariel Zhou. I am an 08, and I am on the DAPAAA board serving in the immediate past chair position. I've been part of DAPAAA since I graduated, and I am going to talk a little bit about some of the salient issues that have impacted our community. I want to contextualize what I'm about to say by commenting on a number that Sarah shared earlier, which is that at DAPAAA, we are over 8,200 members strong, and we are very diverse. Within the alumni that comprise our membership, we have a huge mix of socioeconomic backgrounds and cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And as a group, however, we deal with the model minority stereotype. And this is a stereotype that assumes that Asians and Asian Americans are monoliths that are uniformly successful. We as a group are held out to be the most quote unquote successful racial minority that has essentially figured out a way to overcome racism in this country. And this model minority myth is false and means that often the issues our community faces can be overlooked and undercounted. This is true more broadly in American society and at Dartmouth specifically. And at Dartmouth, this problem means that there are critical areas in academics and student life that have not been addressed and that do need immediate attention. So first, at Dartmouth, we have been advocating for Asian American studies for the last 30 years, and this issue is now more urgent than ever. DAPAAA members and Asian Americans throughout the country have been on the receiving end of elevated anti-Asian violence and hate during the COVID-19 pandemic. After the Atlanta area spa shootings in 2021, I and many others, both Asian American men and women, felt a deep sense of unease and lack of safety moving through the spaces we would ordinarily navigate without a second thought. For example, I've been riding public transport all my life, literally since the 3rd grade, because I grew up in New York City, and now I live in Oregon, DC. I've always felt really comfortable on public transportation, but after the Atlanta shootings, coinciding with the pandemic, I started standing next to the median on my train ride home because I was consistently kind of worried that someone random might sort of look at the way that I look and blame me for, the so-called China virus for COVID. So, that was really jarring for me. My mom, who's in her 60s, who's lived in New York City for over 30 years, she used to go ballroom dancing with her friends and eat at local restaurants at night, but she stopped going out in the evenings. So this is a story I've heard over and over and over again, and it's just not an acceptable way of being. And so in our community, there has been an awakening and a collective realization that the model minority myth doesn't protect us from hate and from violence, and that this myth and all of its manifestations harm us and need to be dismantled. So there has been a national movement by students, faculty, staff, and alumni at influential institutions like Dartmouth to use the most powerful tool of all, education, to combat racism and hate. And so DAPAAA members, students, faculty, and staff have advocated for Asian American studies, for our community's history, our literature, our experiences to be included in the curriculum at Dartmouth and therefore in the national conversation. And our peers around the country have done the same at their institutions. And we're proud that Dartmouth's efforts in particular have been featured in national news media, including the New York Times. And most recently, we were on the cover of the Dartmouth Alumni magazine's July issue, essentially asking, why is it that this institution that we love has not yet included us in the curriculum, and how long will hate against our community be tolerated without using all of the available tools to fight back? So President Beilock, we do feel like the time for Asian American studies is now, because these issues won't wait. And closely tied to Asian American studies is the issue of how Dartmouth can and must do better with recruitment and retention of faculty of color. Because by remedying the historical systems that have not quite worked at Dartmouth and keeping our faculty of color, we can establish a sustainable and permanent Asian American studies program and overcome past tenure denials that have continually set back these efforts. Next, another area we want to call attention to today that our members feel like need to be urgently addressed is student life resources for our community on campus. As Sarah mentioned, in student life, we are the biggest racial minority on campus and have been for the last 20 years. However, the resources dedicated to the community, which includes high numbers of students on financial aid and who are the first generation in their families to go to college, have increasingly waned. The Office of Pluralism and Leadership, or OPAL, has historically been a crucial resource for students, and it has been the office advocating for student life and mental health resources important for this community. It has been the place that supports student leadership and advocacy, that enables students to put on programming that allows for dialogue on salient cultural and intellectual issues on campus, and that has recorded the history of our vibrant community at Dartmouth. However, even as our community has grown in numbers at the college, key administrative resources like OPAL have actually continually diminished over time and have lost funding rather than having their funding increased. So we believe that this gap in student life resources should be addressed with urgency because, among other reasons, historically, Asians and Asian Americans are actually the least likely group to seek formal mental health support, due in part to cultural barriers. And as the data the college itself has collected in the past shows, Asian and Asian American women are among the most at risk for being sexually assaulted on campus, with Asian women grossly overrepresented in past sexual assault statistics as compared to the percentage of students we represent on campus. So the result of the wane in resources is that an increasing number of students in our community are navigating life-changing issues and trying to lead and learn with much less of a sense of belonging in the Dartmouth community than in the past, and with much less support than we think they need and deserve. So as DAPAAA alumni, we have a vision of Dartmouth where we are represented in the curriculum and where Dartmouth enables its graduates to move on to their professional lives with the vocabulary, with understanding, with experience, and the skills that they need to address the pressing issues that face our world, issues like systemic racism, however they manifest as we each move through our spheres of influence. And we want to set up our students to have brave conversations and learn and lead successfully. And we think we can do that by giving them the opportunities, guidance, and support they deserve while they're at Dartmouth. We can go to the next slide. So President Beilock, this community is really looking forward to partnering with you and looking to the leadership of your office and the rest of your administration to achieve this vision, which we hope will be part of your vision for Dartmouth and which will impact generations of our students and alumni to come. We know all of this is going to take a lot of hard work and it's going to take a lot of funding. So we are hoping for your leadership and partnership to financially make our academic and student life visions a reality, including establishing the Asian American and Pacific Islander Academic Enrichment Fund, which is shown on this slide, established in 2021 after the Atlanta shootings as a key fundraising priority. We feel optimistic and we are really excited that you're here because there's a history of Dartmouth leadership adapting to changing times, and we see you continuing this legacy while as Dartmouth's first woman president, pushing new boundaries and making rich connections with our community to enable our students and alumni to move bravely and make change in this world. So thank you again, President Beilock, for being with us today. We look forward to your inauguration and to celebrating with you DAPAAA's 25th anniversary in person in May 2024. And I will now welcome back Carolyn to transition to the Q&A or to the introduction of President Beilock in the Q&A.
Thank you, Ariel. Appreciate that. Appreciate the wonderful presentation you put together. We're going to I'm going to ask President Beilock a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to the group. So when we open it to the group, if you could use the raise hand feature, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and we will call on individuals to ask questions. But to get us started, President Beilock, we'd love to hear you reflect on what you've witnessed during your first few months as president and what you're thinking about as we approach the start of the academic year.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you, Ariel, for starting this off. This meeting is one of the ways in which I'm learning about the Dartmouth community and learning about different facets of the Dartmouth community, what has gone well, and also where our imperfect history is that we have to build on. And so I see this conversation as part of my learning tour. And I've really been on a listening and learning tour. That's how I find that one gets to know an institution and a culture, and is to talk to a lot of people, understand the history, and also not be limited by the history in terms of where we go. I will say it's been really amazing to be here for sophomore summer, which I'm sure many of you have memories of, and to see the tight-knit students working with faculty, and to start to understand what a special community Dartmouth is in terms of not just a focus on undergrads, which certainly is a central ethos of what we do, but with really the ability to have porous connections with our graduate and professional school programs, and also seeing the opportunities to bring students who might identify with a particular racial or socioeconomic group together across those sort of undergraduate, graduate lines as well. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to you today. A couple of the themes that have been really on my mind is how we can really set the stage to innovate, to develop the kind of leaders that we want to go out and change the world, what that culture looks like. And a few of those areas center on things that you mentioned, Ariel, but I'll say them again. One is figuring out how we have the kinds of brave conversations across campus where not everyone agrees, where people hear points of view that are different than their own, where we can center voices that haven't always been at the table so people feel like they belong. I think this is so important in this day and age, and so important at Dartmouth. I firmly believe it's okay to be uncomfortable in the classroom. We have to teach our faculty and help our faculty teach around uncomfortable subjects in the classroom. We have to push folks, but we also have to make sure we're giving support to students and faculty to do this hard work. And to do that, we need to center mental health and wellness in what we're doing on campus. There's no if, and, or but about it. Often higher ed institutions think about wellness as a side something that goes next to academic excellence. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. It's a precursor to it. It's got to be centered. And so I'm really thinking strongly about what that means on our campus to support our students, but also our faculty and staff. You might have noticed that we're now searching for a chief health and wellness officer who will sit on my presidential team and be responsible for health and wellness across the institutions. It's certainly true for our students, but also our faculty and staff, and thinking about work life and thinking about what it means to be an institution that talks about a sense of place and make sure that we have the adequate resources to support that sense of place, whether it's housing and childcare, whether it's folks in Opal to support our students who come from different backgrounds. And I'm really committed to thinking about that and pushing it forward. And if you haven't already seen, on September 28th, Dartmouth will host all living 7 surgeon generals on campus to have a conversation about the wellness and young people across the country. It's only the second time in history that the surgeon generals have all gotten together. And I think it's an important step in having these conversations, talking about what we can do as institutions and individuals to ensure that we're safeguarding the health and wellness of our community. I've also been thinking a lot about what it means to be lifelong. The special bond that alums at Dartmouth have to the college. Sometimes that is despite having a bad experience. Sometimes it's to come back to make the experience better. Sometimes, and oftentimes, I see it as a mix of both. And how we really build on that community. We know that from my own research, for example, that our own views about whether we can succeed, what it means to be accepted in a community, often center on who we see who looks like us or who has had views like us beforehand. And so I really am excited to think about the role that alums play. I think there are very few places that have the kind of alumni community and connection that Dartmouth has. And we should be thinking about what it means, not just 4 years at an institution, but lifelong. And finally, I'm spending a lot of time learning about what we're doing in terms of making our campus and our planet environmentally responsible. I think we often talk about the big green, we have to live it. And it's not so easy to do in a cold rural environment, but to the extent that we can lay a foundation and be a model for how to reach carbon neutrality on our campus, and also think about the places in the world that we're going to help do research and give that knowledge away, I think it's so powerful. So altogether, thinking a lot about what this ecosystem means, and then how we help support and move forward a culture that's focused on brave, honest, open dialogue, centering points of view that haven't always been at the table. It's focused on health and wellness. It's focused on Dartmouth for life, and it's focused on what we do as a campus and as a planet to ensure that we're taking care of this place that we call home.
Great, thank you so much. My next question is, we live in a time when the importance of diversity on campus is being held under a microscope within the national discourse on race, admission, and higher education. How do differences in lived experience affect your conceptualizations of diverse communities at Dartmouth? And what role does diversity play in producing strong outcomes on campus and beyond Dartmouth?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of you probably saw my letter following the Supreme Court decision around affirmative action. And I want to say that it's okay to have different views about what the Supreme Court did. And it's okay to acknowledge that different people feel differently about the case and where it goes. And that's part of what it means to create a brave space on campus, that you can acknowledge that and have those conversations. But what, in my mind, is not up for debate, given the data and the work out there, is that diverse teams with people with different lived experiences, with different points of view, lead to better outcomes. The data are pretty clear in my mind, and it is an important part of what makes Dartmouth able to do the work that it needs to do. And so our commitment to encouraging and looking for the best and brightest students, regardless of their background, is stronger than ever. And our commitment to supporting students while they're here, to learn about their past, to learn about other cultures, to experience different parts of the world, and then go out and be world leaders, I would say, is something that I take very seriously as well.
Wonderful. We are going to open it up for Q&A from the group. So again, if you use that raised hand feature at the bottom, we will go ahead and start our question. Hoping my view is just not, Ning looks like has his or her hand raised. There you are. There you are.
Okay. Thank you, President Beilock, for being with us today. We really, really appreciate it, and I certainly do. So my name is Ning. I've been in higher education for the last 2 decades, which seems so crazy, but it has been that long. I currently work at the Center for Purposeful Work at Bates College, and I found the relationship with my Dean of Student Life, Holly Sate, who passed recently, really, really critical to my development as a student affairs leader and contributor. And also really, really grateful to someone that worked directly for her in her office, Nori Asumura, who is the Assistant Dean of Student Life, and also a dedicated advisor to Asian and Asian American students. And the reality is I actually only had access to Nora as a student in my last year. She came in when I was a senior. I still remember being part of her search. But we have built this, career-long relationship, and she and Holly collectively were so instrumental in helping me develop, again, as a leader in the space. And I feel like based on what I've been hearing from students in terms of working, with my colleagues in DAPAAA, is that the support seems to have diminished since that time 2 decades ago in terms of the support for Asian and Asian American students. And I think it's so critical, the racial ethnic identity development that happens in the traditional 17 to 21, 22 period, and also everything that's going on in the world, and especially with what was written in the Supreme Court, the cases around high school students not even feeling like they can be Asian and that they're too Asian, or what's Asian enough. And I felt like Nora was so critical to us being on campus and even after campus, navigating those issues. So really want to know your thoughts in terms of how you're looking to support individuals, staff members at Dartmouth, supporting not just the Asian population, but certainly any of our, racial, ethnic, and minoritized populations going forward.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I agree, those people in your life that can be mentors in this way, whether it's a staff or a faculty member, change people's worlds. I mean, I can point to a lot of examples in my own life. I've been spending a lot of time getting to know the community life and inclusivity area at Dartmouth, which is part of student affairs, which has OPAL underneath it, and understanding what resources are there, where we might need to go, and also thinking about structurally, we've been thinking more generally about how all of the functions of student affairs align with what's happening with the faculty. It actually turns out structurally, the dean of the college reports to the provost, and the dean of the faculty reports to the president, which is a very odd thing if you're thinking about students working with faculty. And so we're thinking a lot about what that means to think holistically about a student's experience. And I think that will be really helpful. And as we think about making sure that students have the support they need and those mentors and that guidance. There's a lot of really great people working at Dartmouth. And I've seen more and more come in recent months to focus on all of our students. And I think we have more work to do there. But it's thinking not just about the individuals and do we need another person, which may or may not be true. I can't tell you that at the moment. But for me, it's stepping back and asking, do we have the right structure to support students whose voices aren't always featured at the table, who might feel underrepresented, who have unique life experiences? And that's part of what our value proposition is to take the best and brightest and then help them learn how to think, not what to think. I think that's an important distinction. And then go out and have an impact on the world. So we're thinking a lot about the structures to do that right now.
Morna, would you like to ask the next question?
Sure. Thank you, President Beilock, for joining us today. We're really excited about the potential for your leadership. My name is Morna Ha. I'm class of 2004. This question is about Asian American studies at Dartmouth, and it's actually in 2 parts. So just a little bit of background. I began advocating for Asian American studies when I was a student on campus in the early 2000s. And in fact, we just talked about lifelong bonds. I believe that the courses that I took with Professor Vernon Takashita in Asian American history really shaped who I was at that time, grounded me in the country, and really shaped my future. Unfortunately, those classes are no longer, to my knowledge, offered, as is. Professor Takashita is no longer with the college. I came back to this work at the height of anti-Asian violence during the pandemic, only to find that Dartmouth had barely made any progress compared to its peers. So in a span of 20 years, 25 years, what I saw was a continuous cycle of students doing the same exact running around that I did, talking with faculty, talking with deans, writing in newspapers, taking petitions with their students. And not a lot has been accomplished, frankly. Some things have been accomplished and in partnership with the college, but we know that there should be more. We also know that, that there is a history of Dartmouth College presidents shaping academic life to increase feelings of belonging on campus and to really keep up with the changing times. The Native American programs, Latin American, Latino, Caribbean, Jewish studies programs, all were founded under presidents and the leaderships of Presidents John Kemeny and James Friedman. I think the question is this. There are two questions, President Beilock. One, what will you do as president to move Asian American studies forward on campus, building on the 30 years of advocacy work that's been done by its faculty, students, and alumni? And secondly, President Beilock, you have an opportunity to engage right now in taking leadership and prioritizing the investment and time and resources into building the AAPI Academic Enrichment Fund, which was created to fund scholarship and teaching about our community. Will you take that leadership?
So thank you for the history and the questions. I do, first of all, I'm again in learning mode, and that's one of the reasons that I'm really excited to be here talking to all of you. And I've been spending a lot of time with Dean Smith and Associate Dean Matt Delmont and others, faculty involved in this area, really learning about the past. I agree, we should have an Asian American Studies minor, at least to start a program. Others, I think we're behind. And so the question is, how do we do that? In the last few years, we've hired 3 new faculty that work in this area, and we now have at least 8 current tenure lines that do some sort of teaching or research in Asian American studies. I think we need to take the next steps. Faculty decide majors and minors. I can't tell a faculty member to put a major or minor together, but we have a critical mass now to move forward, and I'm excited to help shepherd that. So I've already been meeting with folks across campus, and I think we need to make progress here, and we need to do it quick. The one thing you need is faculty. You need faculty, a critical mass, and we have that now to start doing some work. And so right now I'm working to bring the appropriate people together and to understand how we can move this forward. But it's very clear to me that compared to our Ivy Plus peers, given the population of our students, we have work to do here. We're behind, and we have to get to a place where we can provide the kinds of resources that our students need, desire, and frankly, should have.
Thank you for that. It's exciting to hear. We've got these additional faculty lines that have been hired recently. Other questions? Cheryl, I know you offered to ask questions. I don't know if anyone took you up on that.
Not yet, but again, if somebody is uncomfortable saying it, I'm happy to convey it either anonymously or with your name. Just direct message me in the chat.
Thank you for that. Looks like Angela has our next question.
There, it's so nice to meet you, President Beilock. I'm coming at this from the perspective of being faculty. I was faculty for 6 years at Harvard Medical School at Mass General Hospital, where I moved to Boston like the rest of us do after we graduate from Dartmouth. I'm class of 2007. And part of my reason for leaving was because it was so difficult to see myself there and to see a career there in the work that I do. My scholarship is not even in mental health disparities, or my area is in clinical psychology. But I moved across the country to Seattle, where I am now, to start my own lab. And my area is in clinical neuroscience. And I owe a lot of my career foundations to Dartmouth and what the opportunities it was able to give me. But I was heavily involved in the Asian community on campus, and there were no classes to talk about systemic racism. And I think your comment about structures really speak to me. In our advocacy this past, maybe in the recent past, Morna can tell you more about the historical past, but in the recent past, when we really dug this back up again, we got the same feedback that this needs to come from faculty. And the problem with that is when you're junior faculty, which is kind of where I'm at, but I'm on the cusp of just went up for promotion recently, is that when you don't feel safe in that environment, you don't want to stay. You don't also want to ruffle any feathers until you have tenure. And that is especially true for underrepresented minorities doing scholarship in areas that are not considered as rigorous academically. So that means judgment of their vitas need to be sensitive to the idea that their journals might not be published in the same types of journals. And it's viewed often as being less rigorous, right? So when people are studying diaspora, ethnic studies, things of that nature, they're not viewed as rigorously as other work, right? So how do we combat against that structural problem where we need faculty to promote that? But faculty don't want to come now, especially after hearing about people going up for tenure who are Asian American and being denied tenure despite active student and faculty protests. How do we deal with that structural problem?
Yeah, well, first of all, I will say, it's not unusual for someone not to get tenure. And I think we have to be careful to not conflate not getting tenure with something specifically at an interdisciplinary realm. I mean, I think that's really important, and faculty own the tenure process and they're judging their peers in these situations. So that's really important. The systems and what you said, the greater point about it is true that I can't decide who faculty hire and what they teach, where they teach. This is a part of academic freedom, and I can't tell faculty to put a program together, but I can certainly make sure that we have resources with my deans for lines and are creating the space to do some of that. And so with the additional hires, we now have 8 at least current tenure track faculty who have research and expertise in this space. I think our goal now is to create the space to figure out what the next step is. Is it a minor to start? Do we go for a program? Do we think it's something different? What does it look like? What is uniquely Dartmouth? And so that's part of what I'm helping to facilitate with Dean Smith, with Associate Dean Delmont. How do we create the space and the support to figure out what is best here? And this is, part of the brilliance of having shared governance where faculty do judge their peers, and part of the hardship of not having a totally top-down system where I can wave a wand and say we're doing X, Y, and Z. But as a leader, I know my goal is to identify areas where we have work to do and then create the space and the dialogue and the support to get where we need to go. And as I said, I think a big part of this has been the faculty hires we've made recently, and now we have an opportunity to really to push forward. And I can only imagine how frustrating it is to hear some of this after hearing this for 30 years. I will say the faculty hires are a really important part forward. And so now thinking about where we go from here and creating that vision and space, I think we're in a different spot.
Terrific. Belinda, do you want to, I think I saw you there. Do you want to chat a little bit about what's planned for the 25th while we have the group?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, President Beilock, and so great to see also everyone's faces here, some new and familiar faces. So I think hopefully many of us are aware that this is actually technically our 25th anniversary. So we have been already doing some virtual events, and that is all online. I'll put the website in there. So if you missed our virtual events, you're more than welcome to see some of the recordings. They have been amazing conversations. And then this will, October is our next one coming up with the Dartmouth Club of Hawaii and NAD. And this is going to lead up to our 25th on-campus commemoration in May of 2024. And very excited to have speakers like George Takei and Helen Zia, so a bit of fangirling there for me. But we're also excited to welcome, some friends and alums who, whether it's your first time back to campus in a long time or you've been back many years, we are so excited to have everyone here in celebration. Hopefully, President Beilock, to see you there as well. So thank you for this time.
Yeah, and I think we have it on my calendar and I'm looking forward to attending.
It's on your calendar indeed. Brandon, looks like we have a question from you.
I have to find the unmute button in the corner there. Hi, President Beilock. Congratulations. And my name is Brandon Zhou. I am a class of 22. So I recently left Hanover, although I've been back 3 times already and counting. I guess my question has to do with connection and learning from current students. In particular, I know you've been active with meeting with many of my friends on campus throughout their sophomore summer this term. I was wondering if you had plans or maybe have met already with student leaders, specifically AAPI student leaders, knowing that I think they appear in many different ways as the president of DAO, for instance, the Dartmouth Asian organization. But also I remember myself being a student leader, not necessarily part of a affinity group, but as a part of the DOC, for instance, or in student assembly, wondering if there are plans to meet with students from AAPI backgrounds.
Yeah, I've actually been meeting, as you probably know, and hopefully some of you see on my social media channels, with lots of different students on campus. And at one of my recent coffee chats, which are just open to students, office hours across the institution, I met with several AAPI leaders who came. And it was really great to talk about they were talking about some of the same things that obviously you were talking about in terms of creating the kinds of academic programs that they would like to see on campus. I learned a lot about some of the work they'd done to visualize the history of API at Dartmouth over the years in the library. And we just had a really, very open, honest, I would say brave back and forth. There were about 20 students in the room. And I think this is the way that we make progress forward, is to have those hard conversations. So it's been great, particularly in the summer, to be able to have those conversations.
And we'll get a last question to Shelley before we wrap up.
Hello, President Beilock. I'm Shelley Arakawa, class of 96. You talked a little bit about some structural changes, mentioning the mental health position. I know the Dean of Admissions just became a vice president. What are some of those other leadership changes that you anticipate? And what are those issues that you're expecting those leaders to respond to?
Yeah, well, I talked a little bit about the Chief Health and Wellness Officer, which I think is just such a vital position on campus. You I think saw an email about some of the other changes to my team, and really some great additions. We have a new Vice President for Government and Community Relations, Emma Wolf, who came to us from New York and Barnard, and a new Executive Vice President, Jamisha Delgado-Stevens, who also came from Barnard, and then several folks here who have gotten promotions and are thinking more broadly. One of the big things that I'm trying to do is to have us think across the institution, not just in silos. So what happens for the undergrads, even at the student level, how does that translate to what's happening with the faculty in arts and sciences? How does that relate to the faculty in Tuck or Geisel or the graduate students? And so a lot of what you saw in that message was really intention to think across Dartmouth as a whole, and to create a team that's hard driving, excited about where Dartmouth's been, but understanding that we have more to do and more work to do in the future, and taking fuel from our imperfect past to push it forward. And so I think that happens through people. I think it happens through structures. And I'm really excited about the team we're creating and what we're going to do. We just had an all-day retreat at the Dartmouth Outing Club, which was great a few weeks back, and really, had those hard conversations about how we center different voices on campus, how we make it a campus of open and honest discussions when not everyone always feels like they belong. What structures, what initiatives, what do we need to do to put that in place? And so this is some of what we're thinking about right now. And of course, you'll hear more about where we're thinking as I go into inauguration. But I will say that Dartmouth, as I'm sure you can attest to, is a special place. It has both good and bad elements. It's often been late to change. But it brings an amazing group of students, faculty, staff, and alums together who really are eager to have a positive impact. And I'm a big believer in the 1 + 1 = 3 adage. And so how are we more than the sum of our parts? And so a lot of what I've been doing is thinking about what are the structures we need in place to get there. And I just wanted to say thank you again for having this conversation. I hope just opening up this space for a frank and open conversation, not as easy on Zoom and in person, but a first step. You take as another indication that I'm interested in understanding where we've been and also frankly where we need to go.
Thank you, President Beilock. I know this has been a lively discussion. We appreciate your time, appreciate your attention to this group. We certainly are looking forward to the 25th next May. And I know this group is hard at work at putting that weekend together. So thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate it and appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
It was one of those things that I felt was, we always talk about like